All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining part two of our MISA webinar series on building collaboration between suppliers, provided to you by the Food Production Solutions Association. Today, we're going to focus on post-sale collaboration, where integration challenges, scope creep, and cross-functional coordination become the real test of how suppliers collaborate. If you're not familiar with our webinar series, we have and will encourage questions to be asked. So please add them to the chat function of the webinar and we'll review them at the end of the presentation. With that said, let's welcome our guest, Tom Vipon, General Manager of PFI. Tom oversees all PFI locations and operations, leading teams in the design, manufacture, and support of food-grade conveying and handling equipment for some of the world's largest food brands. He has more than 2 decades of experience in the food industry, and much of it with PFI, formerly known as Cofab and Meyer Machines, which was acquired by the Grody Company family of brands back in 2021. Tom, are you ready?
I'm ready, Brandon. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Excellent. Well, very good. Well, General Manager of PFI, I'm sure you've seen a lot in your time frame.
So when I in CoFab, I started out on the shop floor, worked my way up to field service. From there, I was in project management and so on and so forth. So wore a lot of different hats during that time.
I can only imagine so. So let's talk about when collaboration breaks down. Got a lot of experience there, probably seen different things with different projects. Walk us through what you've seen, maybe your top 4.
Absolutely. So, in the beginning of these projects, right, before you get a PO, we have applications engineers working with the sales team, with the customer, working through that layout. It could be months going through those layouts with that customer, several different revisions on that side of it. We do a 2D layout in front of them guys to make sure that the vision of what they're looking for, that solution that we're going to try to provide for them, right? That breakdown then becomes between, once we receive that PO, that internal kickoff meeting between our applications engineer, our sales team, and project management and engineering. That's crucial for us as we try to make sure that what that sales team and applications engineer is looking at with that customer, making sure that gets transitioned to our team in-house.
Very good. I can imagine you think about this transition timeframe. Communication is very critical for your overall success, especially you talk internally and externally. But as you kind of look at the breakdown and the process between collaboration with various suppliers, what are some things that you would try to tell to this audience or things to focus in on to keep that collaboration at a high level?
So first of all, the biggest thing is putting one person in charge, that one point of contact. So that customer has one person to go to. If we're involved in a project that includes, several vendors, it's a turnkey solution for us that we're going to be, engineering it, installing it. That one point of contact is crucial for us. So that, as they say, you get too many cooks in a kitchen, it just makes a mess, right? So when you have that one point of contact for us and able to communicate that internally and externally, it helps us a long way on that side of it.
Absolutely. So now you start to think about, once you have the single point of truth, is that somebody in your company that you just designate, or do they already kind of know that function in the project?
So we designate that, right? So we have a group at PFI that is a protein team and a snack and baking team. So when we do that on the protein side, let's say we're getting something on the protein side, we're taking engineers and managers, project managers that have already been involved in this industry, and we don't have to change anything on the spec side of it. We know what's coming from it, and we collaborate through that. But there's also that we choose that one point of contact for that customer, that project manager.
That's good. And I think I relate with having too many cooks in the kitchen. It just becomes very unorganized, and to have that kind of spokesperson on behalf of your company, I think keeps at least your portion of the project very focused and allows the other suppliers to know exactly who they need to have the conversation with.
Absolutely. The other thing too is you got to look at it if it's a corporate driven sale, but you also have to work with the plant level, right? So we want to make sure we're doing the right things for both sides of that. And you know how messy that can get sometimes, right? So that one point of contact can make those decisions and make sure that we're moving forward in the right way.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about communication cadence. What would be some suggestions to the audience?
So what we like to do, Brandon, is not only we set up weekly meetings throughout when we're doing the engineering, right? Number one, we got to make sure we're our deadlines, right? We have our FAT dates, we have our install dates. So we're trying to keep that tight timeline. So we have a weekly call with the right people, not having a bunch of people in those meetings, but the right people involved internally and externally. And what we do is we go through that and, you know, the customers, we need to have them sign off on approval drawings as well on a timely fashion. But also, once it gets through engineering phase, what we like to do is as it's going through manufacturing, we like to take pictures, videos of where we're at. It may be on the laser one week, and then the next week, hey, we're showing pictures of, hey, we're getting it built. We're showing that process through it. And they see it. Not only are they reading, hey, yep, this is, you know, our weekly calls, we're talks, sending out emails of where we're at, but they're also seeing it, you know. And it stirs a lot of questions up of, hey, do we have to have guarding in some places? Do we have to have, you know, do we have to have a different type of transition? We're trying to catch that before the FAT. So those are things that I think have brought a lot to us internally, getting those pictures and videos out for that customer to see it and understand it, and knowing, hey, if there is a hiccup, we're going to talk about it right away, right? Making sure that, hey, if there's a date that we can't hit, we're talking about it right away, or vice versa. If the plant comes back and says, hey, we're out another 2 weeks, you know, that we have those discussions right away, being as transparent as we can.
Sure, sure. I'm thinking a lot of that is interface documentation, you know, mechanical design, software design. You mentioned a little bit about safety guarding. You know, do you find most customers appreciate that level of detail and that part of the scope of the project, or do a lot of customers like to do it on the back end once they actually physically see the equipment at the FAT?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think a lot of guys like to see it up front to see the direction that we're going in, and then also being on FAT hands-on, be able to see it and be able to run through that FAT running. You know, we've done them where we just done a dry run, or we've done it with product on hand. So it's a little bit of both, right? I think the customers like to see it as it's going through the shop.
Sure, sure. Absolutely. So now you think about you're probably going through some interface documentation. What happens when scope creep gets introduced into a project? How do you handle that as a company?
So that's again that one point of contact, right? Making those type of decisions, making sure, hey, if something changes through engineering, right? As we're going through that, we got to be upfront and talk with that customer. If scope changes, we have to talk about dates. We have to make sure that everything is up front with that customer, telling them, hey, this may push us out 2 weeks because of that change. Again, it's that communication, and the sooner the better, right? If you wait, if they assume that we're going to take this on and we're going to still hit those dates, that's something that we never want to do as a company. If, you know, we want them to succeed, and if they succeed, we succeed, right? So those are things that, you know, they may be a little harder conversations up front, but I'd rather do that in the very beginning than at the end of a project.
Agreed. Well said. Well said. Let's talk a little about communication, or let's further, excuse me, everybody. Let's further the conversation communication. You know, we talked a little bit about meeting and meeting structure and the cadence. You know, walk me through kind of what you kind of tasked your team regarding, you know, a good cadence versus bad cadence, and then just the meeting structure in itself.
Absolutely. So again, we do a weekly meeting. We try to have that weekly meeting with the customers, right? And also what we like to do, Brent, is we use AI for our notes, right? That's helped us tremendously. You know, when you're in front of the customer and you have your 3D layout and you're going through that project, talking either about the equipment or the install or what have you, it's hard to take notes. It's hard to sit there and go through everything and not be able to write down all the notes and then send them out to the customer when you're done. But let's say that meeting gets done and you jump on the next one and you've got your notes in front of you. It could be hours later before you get to those notes. It's very difficult. So we've used AI quite a bit right now, the past 6, 8 months, either internal meetings or external, and that's helped us out a lot. But as far as a cadence, again, it's that weekly cadence, making sure that we have the right people, whether it's out of the engineering phase or the install phase, making sure we're touching, that project with the right people for our customer.
Yeah. How do you prevent, all the suppliers jumping on a call, all collaborating? They're probably all providing their updates, but it really is not driving value to the end customer. How do you kind of manage that?
That's a great question. The last thing you want is a customer to play referee, right? And try to keep everybody in line. What we like to do is we like to have an offline meeting with those vendors. Again, if the customer is not successful, we're not going to pay, right? So we try to have those meetings separately with our other vendors, and we talk about transitions, those type of things, putting our equipment in their layout, vice versa, and then trying to have that meeting with the customer to make sure we're all on the same page. So
Yeah.
it's difficult, right? It's when you have 4 or 5 different vendors getting involved in one project, it can get difficult. But again, having that one point of contact for us has helped us out quite a bit.
I mean, so many of us work together on many projects throughout the year. So you're kind of used to
Mhm.
how companies are set up and their various procedures. When you're trying to introduce like a new supplier you're trying to work with, how do you kind of manage that expectation? Because you mentioned something very valuable. You're actually having a pre-call with the supplier before you get on a call with the actual end customer. I think that's a very valuable tip for this audience.
Yeah, I appreciate. Yeah, I think for us, again, it's when you if we're in charge of that project, right, and from the very beginning, if we're doing a turnkey solution and we're bringing in other vendors to help us create that solution for that line for that customer, those internal meetings up front is so critical for us to be successful and make sure that we're able to hit our dates with other vendors, right? That always creeps in. We have our opinion on when we can get our equipment done, but we got to get with those other vendors to make sure, hey, we're going to hit those dates too. So
Yeah. When a customer sees their suppliers that they chose for the project misaligned, that usually raises red flags very, very quickly, and we kind
absolutely.
of deter some trust within that
Hmm.
project.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah, like I said, you don't want the customer to be playing referee. And when you're doing a turnkey solution, they're writing one PO, right? They want to make sure that you're taking care of that from start to finish. So that's on in our hands to make sure we're doing the right things. And again, having that one point of contact is huge, right? And they're not having to reach out to 4 or 5 different people. If you look at like Grody, we have what, 4 or 5 different divisions, and we may pull in Vanmark to help us with a project, right? We may pull in Grody for a slicer for a project. Those type of things, I don't expect the customer to reach out to our other sister companies. We'll take care of that for them and make sure we're doing the right thing.
That's awesome. Well, good. Well, let's talk about sometimes when scope creep or challenges get reintroduced back into a project, and now the customer is not necessarily using your point of contact. Maybe they introduce the sales team back into this conversation again. How do you manage that? That can be always a very challenging time when the customer re-engage sales back into a project.
It's very tough, right? Because maybe the sales team told them, "Hey, we can get this done in X amount of time frame." Maybe they set expectations before they even talk to us internally. Those are difficult discussions, but they're things that we then have an internal meeting and say, "Hey, can we make these deadlines that the customer's asking for now?" And if we can't, we've got to be upfront and tell them right away, "Hey, this is reality," right? Reality tells us number one, we want to make sure we're doing the right things for you. We don't want to have any hiccups at your startup. We want to make sure we're, hey, 95, 98%, hey, this is going to look great at the FAT. And then after the FAT, we get walked through that. But again, those are tough discussions to have with that customer. But again, being upfront and honest and letting them know, hey, this is what's going to happen for on our side to make sure we're getting that project done for you.
Yeah, very much being aligned across all your business is extremely critical. I mean, you can't have sales divided with engineering or sales divided with manufacturing. Ultimately, the customer is going to see that and, quite frankly, point that out to your organization.
And that's, like I said, with that kickoff, that internal kickoff meeting between applications engineers and sales with our internal engineering and project management. That's so crucial to make sure the timing, what that looks like up front, right? So we can immediately talk to that customer and say, hey, this is the Gantt chart we have. This is what we're looking at. We're going to hit your deadline, your time frame, or hey, this may be, a couple weeks out, what have you.
Shift focus a little bit to engineering. Let's say you get past the documentation, everybody's signed off, the mechanical, the interface, the software. Your engineering team's now starting to put things down on CAD. They're making drawings. They ultimately will have to manufacture something. What happens when engineering makes a slight change that maybe doesn't understand the overall impact to the project or to the customer? How do you manage that?
That's a great question, right? So if engineering makes that change that the customer didn't know about or look at, and we start going down this road of getting those drawings in front of them, and now you start going down, how many revisions in engineering, right? So now you frustrated the customer, you're frustrating the engineering team because they're going back and forth. So those expectations up front, having those weekly meetings, hopefully we can catch that early enough to where, hey, we can stop and change it right away instead of going down that road of having, 4 or 5 different revisions.
Yeah. Talked a lot about alignment all throughout this webinar. That's a great message for this group that's in the audience. Think about now, if you're misaligned through sales, through your kind of sign-offs, engineering, and now manufacturing, ultimately who pays the price is the commissioning team. Because
Absolutely.
The customer expectation is still for it to be delivered based on X date, up and running by X date, running this throughput by X date. And if you get misaligned or the project gets sideways much earlier on in the timeline, it can create some real challenges for the commissioning team.
Absolutely. And like I said, like I've told my team several times, you can never over communicate enough, right? We cannot over communicate that with the customer. Again, there's times like, right now we have a project going on for a customer. It's mid-March that we have to have it done, and we're just hitting the shop now. So we have to make sure that internally we're having meetings with purchasing, meetings with engineering, meeting with manufacturing to make sure that, hey, we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's to make sure we get this done and in time, but correctly, right? So, if we get it done, but is it right? So those are things that we want to make sure that we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's.
Yeah. Kind of based on your experience, what's your philosophy on sales engagement during the commissioning phase of a project? What would be your policy? Do you want your sales team members out there during the time of the commissioning working alongside the customer? And
no. God love them. Yeah, they do a great job, but that's the time that, I would rather have the sales team come in after we're up and running and seeing the customer, hey, what do you need from us? Everything going well. But during that time, it's handed off to the right team members to make sure this is done correctly. So,
yeah, and that's a good message because you do want to keep your commissioning team focused on the task at hand, keeping the customer focused, getting them up in production. But you also want your sales team at some point to come back and almost kind of walk back through the project again and what worked well, what did not. And there's kind of a time and place in the project. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for your philosophy.
You bet.
Let's talk a little bit just about delivering, seamless customer experience. I mean, that's obviously critical. There's this kind of old, phrase where sales sells the first one. The organization sells lines two, three, four, five, and six. So the customer experience is extremely critical. Now you find yourself, with the communication of just making sure there's not finger pointing through the project. How do you kind of manage expectations with your teams, your suppliers, so they all understand finger pointing is not an option? We all need to work together. How does PFI kind of handle larger projects with that extent?
That's so we again siloing out what we did with the protein team and the snack team. That's, I think, a huge start, right? Because now we have people that are dedicated to RTE design. We don't have to go back and forth from a snack side to a protein side. So that we cleared up a lot of things there, right? So with that being said, we also have project management that is right with our protein team or our snack team. We also have our sales team that is dedicated to the protein side versus on the snack side. So again, those are things that we put in place about 2 years ago, and it's really paid dividends for us to get the small details, but they're big details, to get those captured those right up front and making sure that again, having that one point of contact, making sure that we're communicating that with a customer.
Yeah, that's extremely critical. And I was thinking a little bit about just acceptance testing. And when we dealing with a very large project, many different suppliers, a lot of different suppliers will have definition of success as completion is a little bit misaligned. And walking through that throughout the project is very, very critical. But how do you manage it on the back end when maybe you are misaligned? Because the supplier that maybe you contractually have on your paper is saying they're complete, but overall the customer says the project is not complete. How do you handle that?
It's a great question, right? So the biggest thing is once we get to the FAT standpoint, right? And let's say they come back and say that this is not complete. This is not maybe an RTE design, or it's not guarded the way we needed to, what have you. That's when we have to step up and not point fingers in front of the customer and just make sure, hey, we're going to get it done. We're not going to have that communication in front of that customer, but we're behind closed doors, we're going to get it done and make sure it gets done. And then that way we can turn around and talk with our vendor and talk through that, one-on-one on that side of it. But again, that's what PFI is, right? We make sure that we're doing the right things for that customer. We're not going to sit there and point fingers. We're just going to make sure it gets done and get done correctly and move on. And we'll have those talks later on.
Yeah. Customers should not manage the project. It's your
Correct.
goal to manage it. It's your job to manage the project. And I think a lot
Absolutely.
about, when things kind of get sideways in a project, customers also don't need to fully understand your internal process and your acronyms. And that's always a good challenge to your sales and your commission team. When a customer raises a red flag, obviously we need to be very mindful to listen first, and then two, bring that back organized into the organization or back to this point person in the project, and allow that individual to manage the company and bringing
Absolutely.
a conclusion to that problem.
And again, that's, like I was saying, we've used Grody, we've used Van Mark in a lot of our lines. That's our one point of contact going back to either Van Mark, Grody, or whatever vendor we're using, and make sure that, hey, that guy's talking to them, make sure they're doing their job, making that decision, and making sure that customer is well aware where we're at and what we're doing.
Sure, sure. Very good, very good. Well, I'm going to take a quick peek into the chat to see if there's any questions out there. And again, as we walk through the webinar, if you have a question that you'd like to ask of Tom or myself, now's a great time to do so. And just a quick check in the chat. I don't see anything, Tom, at the moment. I guess we're pretty thorough.
Yeah, right.
Hopefully, we'll get one here within the next few seconds. If not, we'll start to bring the webinar to a conclusion. But one last call for questions from the audience. Tom, I don't see anything. So first and foremost, thank you for sharing your valuable insights today. And thanks to everyone for joining us. These are exactly the kind of real world challenges that don't end when contracts are signed, and why discussions like this really truly matter. A recording will be available of today's webinar, and we invite you to keep the discussion going on FPSA Connect. If today's webinar is resonating within you, I'd also strongly encourage you to continue the conversation with us in person at the Food Solutions Exchange and Conference, or referred to as FSX. Registration is currently open, and early bird pricing will end this Sunday, February the 8th. So get in front of that early bird pricing. FSX is where these conversations will go much deeper and cover a wide variety of topics that will be impactful for your business. And just a quick look ahead, next Wednesday at the same time, we'll be hosting an Ask Me Anything webinar with our Red Circle honorees, offering a candid, interactive conversation you don't want to miss. Thank you again for joining us today. We hope to see many of you at FSX. Thanks again.